I actually look at Utah's roster. I'm not intimidated by the receivers, not intimidated by the running back. Honestly, I'm not overly intimidated by Devon Dampier. That offensive line is unreal. Because they are so good, everybody else has time. Devon Dampier he legitimately has 6 or 7 seconds to throw on most plays. They have been that good.
Hello and welcome to the Aptive Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds. This week joined by the one and only Jeffrey William Hansen. Jeff, how's it going? How was your weekend?
Doing well, man. Weekend's good. Weekend's always better when BYU wins, too. I was nervous for a while. I can't pretend like I wasn't, but at the end of the day, all worked out, so weekend's good.
Why were you worried? It was an easy win. There was no doubt. It was wire to wire. I don't think anyone was worried at all.
Just a real comfortable, stress-free one of those games, right?
Yeah, totally. By the way, your middle name is not William, I assume. I just made that.
It was not. It was close. It wasn't really close, but William and Stewart sort of feel like they're close. So I'm giving you partial credit.
We'll just make it William for the show, and then you can be Stewart any other time. Okay, so as always, this podcast is sponsored by, and the title sponsor for the podcast is TrueWear Services. They power the Cougar Board merch store, and this week's drop, Jeff, I don't know if you've seen every week our drop, but this week we've got a very nice drop for the Holy War. BYU black hoodie with a royal BYU logo in the middle. The back is what sells this thing, man. If you can see this on camera, and if you're not watching on YouTube, go over to YouTube and check it out. It says Rep the Y, and then right behind Rep the Y is this kind of monochromatic 8-bit Cosmo from the 70s, right? 60s, 70s, like old school Cosmo.
That's the Dallin H. Oaks Cosmo right there. That looks good.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, it probably is. That probably literally is Dallin H. Oaks right there on the back of this shirt. So go support Dallin and go support BYU and the Cougar Board merch store. The second one, and this was a part of the drop last week. I think the colors of the shirt were white and black. So this one's in a royal blue. It says Holy War on top. It's got Cosmo whooping up on swoop there. I will be wearing this to the game, by the way. So keep an eye out for me. But that is what is in this week's Cougar Board merch store drop. Head on over there and check it out. By the way, I love your Utah Mammoths hat.
It's hockey season, and I'm trying my best to be a hockey guy. I still don't really understand what's going on, but I know that there's a Mammoth involved now. I know that they won the other day. That's like baby steps. I'm getting there.
So my only experience, and we're getting a little bit off the rails here, my only experience really with hockey is when I went to Alaska for a year and a half. We covered the ACHL Alaska Aces.
Okay.
So it was like the equivalent of the Utah Grizzlies here. That was like kind of their in-conference rival was the Alaska Aces. That was my experience with hockey. I love hockey in person. It's really hard to watch on TV.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm learning.
Speaking of hard to watch, that second and third quarter against Arizona for BYU, one of the most and we could talk about the weather delay. I think the weather delay had obviously played a little bit of a factor, and I think people are kind of considering it maybe too much of a factor. I thought the weather itself was a factor of that game, but how much of a factor do you think the weather played in that game, Jeff?
Yeah, I think it was huge. You look at the way that first quarter went, especially the way it started. BYU came out hot. They had some passing game working. It wasn't great, but they hit Parker on that big long touchdown pass. There was some rhythm in the passing game. Then, of course, LJ was doing his thing really from opening kickoff, but the offense was humming. They were confident. You could tell that the juice was there. And then, the weather delay hits, and I'm with you. I think that the weather played a bigger role in the second half than the weather delay. But I think the weather delay played a huge role too, but not necessarily because of BYU, but for what Arizona was able to do, that they were able to kind of recoup, catch their breath. They're at home, right? They've got their home amenities available to them. They're able to watch their film, to do whatever it is. And BYU's sitting in a visiting team locker room. And if you don't know what that's like, and this isn't the NFL where the league mandates like certain standards for everybody, even whether you're the home or the visiting team, just Google visiting team locker rooms in college football. That's not a comfortable hour and a half for BYU. So they're just hanging out, and it sucks, but it is what it is. I really give the players, I don't know if it's a player thing, a coach thing, but really everybody probably deserves a lot more credit than we were giving them for their ability to bounce back after that slow start and then figure out how to adapt with the weather. It was good. So I think that the weather played a huge role. I think that the weather delay was a big benefit for Arizona, and kudos to the Cougs for being able to fight through all of that.
Yeah, and I think at the very least, the weather delay probably affected the momentum, right? Yeah. Now, Arizona had just scored, but BYU's offense couldn't be stopped, right? There was a 75-yard touchdown pass to Parker. LJ had a massive run. I think the offense was humming. And defensively, I think they were kind of already on their heels at that point because Arizona, again, had just scored. But at the very least, the weather delay kind of affected that momentum. And they went into the locker room, and I think Kalani, when they came out, he talked to the sideline reporter, and she reported that they just kind of hung out. And I don't really know like what else you're really supposed to do. She said there wasn't, they weren't really looking at iPads. They weren't looking at, any sort of game film. And I guess there's not really a ton of game film to look at that point. You're one quarter in.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else you would be able to do. And Kalani's obviously trying to keep his guys relaxed and warm and calm, and not thinking too much about the game. But they come out and they're just ice cold. And it's funny, like BYU's had their own fair share of weather delay games. And I kind of went through the time capsule of BYU football games that I remember that had weather delays. I want to start with you though. What are your kind of memorable weather delay games? What games do you remember where there was a weather delay for BYU?
For me, it's 2013 that was so memorable because it was, back-to-back weeks, right? And really, I think it was kind of a tale of what I was talking about earlier. Virginia was not a good football team that year, right? Like Virginia was a really bad football team, and BYU lost that game because there's a 2-hour weather delay in the middle of the game. You're the visiting team. There's just not much for you to do. There's not anywhere to get comfortable. Your body starts to get cold. You got to get all stretched out again. And you don't have any of those amenities that you do as the home team. And Virginia is able to come back and they come back and win in that game. It was an ugly game. The weather played a role, all that stuff. Then the very next week, now, if I remember right, Jake, I don't think that the game had started yet with Texas, right? No. I believe that the weather game happened before kickoff, or the weather delay rather, happened before kickoff, but kind of the same idea, just the inverse for BYU. It's at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. They're able to be as comfortable as they can throughout that delay. Texas is stuck inside that visiting locker room, and we all know how that story unfolded. BYU comes out hot, they look loose, and Texas is flat from the very beginning, and BYU takes advantage of it, right? So those are the two weather delays that come to mind. I know that there's some others that have happened recently, right? Like Gary Bohannon had one too, I think. Was he playing for USF or was BYU? Was he with BYU? I can't remember, but it feels like there was one that year.
Yep, I wrote this down. So the four that I wrote down are the two that you mentioned. It's interesting. I actually didn't even think about this. It does seem to favor the home team, and there's one exception to this. So there's 2006, against Tulsa, and I was at this game, and granted, the weather delay didn't happen until late in the fourth quarter. The game was already out of hand. So it's not really, this is more of just like, hey, a weather delay just happened to happen.
Yeah.
happened to occur in the middle of the game. I don't think it had any real effect on the outcome of the game, but that was kind of an interesting, to me, it was like, there's just so many weird games that happened where a weather delay occurred in the middle of the game. And this is one of them. This is a Tulsa team that was a pretty high powered offense. It seemed like coming to this season, 2006, obviously a great season for BYU. They had their own high powered offense, and BYU just dominated that game. And I specifically remember a play from that game where Curtis Brown had a catch out of the backfield, and he probably broke 5 or 6 tackles, and not like arm tackles. It was like he broke out of dog piles and then stiff armed a guy and then ran, another 12 yards into the end zone. One of the best individual effort plays I've seen from a BYU player in my lifetime. And that was just a game where BYU again dominated that game. It was 49-24 at the end of the game. But there was a weather delay towards the end. And I remember there were a lot of fans that left because the game was over. BYU was going to win the game. And so BYU fans were like, I'm out of here. But I was a student at the time, right? 2006, it was before my mission. And I'm like, I'm going to be a crazy student. I'm going to stay throughout the whole game. And so I stayed through the downpour of a weather delay, through the lightning, and watched the end of that game. But that was just a weird game. And then the two that you mentioned, and then you mentioned the Gary Bohannon game. So BYU went to USF. There was a little bit of a weather delay. And then Puka Nacua comes out and scores a 75-yard touchdown on the first play of the game. Again, Gary Bohannon was the USF's quarterback. Max Tooley had a pick 6. Chris Brooks went 135 yards on 13 carries and a touchdown. Just another kind of wild game. BYU wins 50-21. And so these like weather delay games seem to result in these kind of weird outcomes with kind of fluky, massive plays. And this was kind of no exception. Granted, the two big plays for BYU happened before the weather delay, but after that, it just was weird. Like it felt like BYU had just completely lost control of that game for two quarters. And luckily they were able to kind of regain it in the fourth. And I think a big part of that, Jeff, was LJ Martin and Bear Bachmeier.
Yeah.
And I want to start with LJ Martin's production, because I think he truly, and no pun intended, carried BYU to a win in that game. 25 carries, 162 yards, and one touchdown. What did you take out of LJ Martin's game?
Yeah, I mean, LJ just continues to do what LJ is expected to do. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I don't know what the word is, like learning about LJ, I guess, or gaining a lot of confidence in about LJ. He has never had to perform at this high of a level because he has to, right? Like he's always been good. He's had games where he performs like this, but he's currently performing like this because BYU desperately needs him to, right? Like he's the leader. He is the engine that makes this thing go. And that's a different set of expectations for a player. You never really know how somebody is going to assimilate into that role where you're now the guy. And LJ Martin, he's playing the best football of his career. He has grown into that role as the guy. And every single week he continues to deliver. Really impressed with what he did against Arizona, because you kind of get a sense early in that first half and maybe after the delay, he was still kind of trying to figure out. He had broken some big runs, but the way that the running game was working, they were still trying to get outside. They were trying to do a few different things. As that game progressed, you saw LJ, and maybe it's Aaron Roderick who deserves a lot of the credit as well, but they very clearly figured out what worked. And LJ had no problem saying, okay, I'm one cut and get upfield for the rest of the game. And that was pretty well what he did, and he had great success doing that. And to me, that's the sign of his maturation as a running back is, hey, look, let's find what works. Let's continue to go until they stop it. And fortunately, Arizona never did.
Yeah, and the question is, like, I think a lot of fans were saying, why are we not giving the ball more to LJ? And 25 carries is not a small number, especially at the college level. You don't typically have a workhorse back,
not anymore,
like an LJ Martin. Utah does. Like Utah tends to do that, right? Mekhi Bernard last year. They've had Asiata. They've had guys, right? They've had Joe Williams. They've had running backs who are kind of your workhorse back out of the backfield. BYU doesn't typically do this, right? Lopini Katoa shared reps. Even Jamal Williams, to an extent, shared some reps. Obviously, Taysom Hill was a big part of that. He took a lot of the carries as well. But LJ Martin is being relied on as this workhorse back, and I think 25 carries is a lot. And it's funny. Like I feel like every week in the podcast we have to defend A-Rod, and maybe we're only defending him against 5 fans that are very vocal against him. And I don't know what your feelings are on A-Rod. I'm very much an A-Rod fan, and it's funny. Last week against West Virginia, BYU was running the ball. I think they were pinned inside their own 5. They were running the ball. And BYU fans were complaining about running the ball up, 20 points in the fourth quarter inside the 5-yard line. And it's like, that's when you want to run the ball.
Yeah.
And in this game, it feels like those same fans, and they could be very well 2 groups of different fans, but you had fans in this game that are complaining that we're not running the ball enough, right? LJ is your workhorse. LJ is getting 6.5 yards a carry. Why are we not running to him or handing the ball off to him more? And I certainly think there were some instances probably in the third quarter. I think also late in the fourth quarter when they were driving to score, and probably in overtime, they could have utilized him a little bit more. But again, 25 carries, 162 yards and a touchdown is great production, and it's great use of your running back. And if you use him more, you run the risk of injury. And the other part of this, Jeff, is I thought Bear was another great run option for BYU. Now, when people said, I think LJ should have run the ball more, I think what they mean is BYU should have just run the ball more, right? The pass game wasn't working. And Bear provided that kind of second wrinkle in the run game that, now granted, he only had 4 yards of carry, which isn't terrible. It's not great. 22 attempts, 89 yards, 22 attempts for a quarterback. I think Bear after the game was like, wow, I had 22 attempts. Like he didn't even realize, like, he had carried the ball as much as a normal running back would in another normal game. So I disagree with the fact that LJ was underutilized. I actually think he was utilized great. And I think that I was very much in agreement that A-Rod utilized his quarterback and running back in the run game. I thought that was a great decision, especially in the rain, and it paid off for BYU.
I think there's a lot of layers that go into this when you look at LJ Martin's usage going forward. Look, Sione Moa is not back. He's not coming back for a while. I don't know if Kalani has set an official timeline or anything like that, but don't expect him back for a while. November at the earliest, right? Like it's potentially a season-ending thing. And so you look at that running back room, and that's it. It's LJ and then a bunch of unknown. It's Preston Rex, who people have raved about, but he's got like 4 carries in his career. You don't know what he is yet. Enoch Nawahine, people have talked highly about him in the past, but you kind of know what he is. Jovessa Demuni's another freshman that he had some burst in his lone game with action, but he fumbled the ball. There's not a lot there. So if this was game 12, I bet you LJ Martin carries the ball 35 times. But it's not. And there's rain, and the turf is wet. And Arizona has kind of crappy turf to begin with under the best of circumstances, and it's wet now because there's a hurricane. You've got to play a 12-game season, even in the midst of a single game. And I think that's what A-Rod is having to figure out. And so when I say there's multiple layers to that, there's the load management that you have to manage with LJ for sure. But LJ could still go out and get hurt drive 1 against Utah, and all of a sudden, all of those other guys that we just went through that are unknown, that's a really tough spot to be in to have your first experience where all of a sudden you're the guy. So you've got to get Bear comfortable running the football. You've got to get Preston Rex some carries when you can, because you might need him in a week or two. You've got to get Enoch Nawahine in there. You've got to find something else that works. You can't just have LJ at the position that is the most vulnerable for injury on the entire football field. You've got to build that depth. So it's the nature of what it is. You're managing the load, and you are trying to build out the depth, knowing that your backup workhorse that you love is going to be gone for a while. So I'm with you. I like the way that they handled LJ's load. I wish that, and honestly, I think that they probably would have liked to use him less. But they had to use him as much as they did in order to claw back into that game. I don't think A-Rod wants to give him the ball 25 times. He had a couple of targets as well, and he was taking a lot of heat as a pass protector. If you watch Bear in that pass game, almost every single time that it was a pass play, LJ's there in max protect. BYU plays a ton of max protect, and Arizona was sending blitzes all the time from different places. And LJ was the guy who had to step up, and he played phenomenally well, but those are more hits. That's more contact. LJ felt that game, right? Like, I haven't spoken to LJ, but I could promise you he was as sore on Sunday morning as he has been all season long because of the toll that game took on him.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was actually going to bring that up too, is people are kind of, forgetting about LJ's pass protection.
Yeah.
Massive. Like, I don't know if he's taken a step forward in anything. It's probably his pass protection. I don't know how good he was last year, but I specifically remember one play in the Arizona game, and it was the game tying drive, I believe, if not the field goal before that. But they're driving down the field. It's 3rd and 7, and Bear throws an incomplete pass to Chase. He drops the ball. I don't know why Chase keeps dropping balls. He shouldn't be dropping, but he dropped the ball, right? So it's 4th and 7. This is crunch time, right? By the way, I think, and we can talk, we can compare Bear to Jake Retzlaff all we want, but I think last year's team does not kick a field goal and score a touchdown in those last 2 drives. I just don't think they do it. I don't think they have the mental fortitude. I think Jake was too mistake prone, made bad decisions. Now, Bear made bad decisions in this game. I'm not going to say this is Bear's best game by any means, but he made bad decisions. So they're set up on 4th and 7, right? They have to get a first down here. The game's over, right? I think there's like a minute left. And, people will point to Bear's throw to Parker. Parker's catch was great down the sideline. Great decision. Everything about that play was great. If you go back and watch it, LJ threw a block against a stunting lineman that I don't remember who the offensive lineman was. He missed him. Like he went around him. Like he was totally confused by the stunt and missed him. LJ was there to give Bear just enough time to throw that ball. And if he doesn't throw it, he's sacked. The game's over. And it's just those little things that I think LJ does really well. He doesn't sulk when he's not getting the ball. Now, granted, he had 25 carries this game, so he's not going to sulk after a 25 carry game, but he is invested in every single play. And those are the types of plays that allow you to win these types of games. And LJ through that throwing that block allowed that win to happen. Cougar fans, the Holy War is here and BYU is coming in claws out. The Claws Out collection from Cougar Board and True Wear bring the fire with heavyweight tees, the Rep the Y hoodie, and the vintage Cougar hat. All designed to show your true blue pride when it matters most. From the tailgate to the final whistle, this drop's built for comfort, grit, and Cougar energy. Don't wait, Cougars. Order today and be ready for the rumble. The Holy War is here, so go claws out and rep the Y with pride. Cougar fans, nothing fuels game day like championship level barbecue. At R&R Barbecue, we smoke our meats low and slow, serve up crave-worthy slides, and keep the good times rolling. Whether you're tailgating, celebrating a win, or just hungry for real barbecue, R&R's got you covered. R&R Barbecue, rooted in flavor, raised in smoke. The second part of this was Parker's reception, and obviously 1 of 5 catches. He had 117 yards. It's a second game of over 100 yards receiving. Parker in the passing game was pretty much all they had. Again, I mentioned Chase's drop. Chase didn't even have a catch until like a little over 4 minutes left in the third quarter. I don't know if it's because they were bracketing him. I don't know if it's because Chase just couldn't get open. Obviously he had that drop late in the game. I think he was targeted, one time in the first half, and it was, I don't remember the play, but he either dropped it or it wasn't on target. But Chase was essentially taken out of this game, and they needed Parker. By the way, Carson Ryan was taken out of it. He had 2 drops in the first half, and I don't think they targeted him after that. So the passing game was all Parker Kingston, and Bear needed Parker to step up, and that's exactly what he did. I was very impressed with what Parker did in this game.
Yeah, I was too, and BYU needed him. One of the little quiet things, last thing I'll just like pass protection, and it's not necessarily about LJ, but if you watch BYU over the last 2 years, one thing that they do, I mentioned it, they play a ton of max protect, right? That they're keeping the running back in and they're keeping tight ends in. They run a lot of 3-guy routes. And when you're running 3-guy routes like that, if you're not creating space, then that play is dead. And Chase was not getting open, and Carson was not getting open. Cody Hagan, I think, had some success, but he's still so young. He's not that guy that you look to as wide receiver 1. And so BYU really needed somebody who was going to be able to create enough space, and Parker was that guy. You could make an argument that Parker, he's not wide receiver 1. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows it's Chase Roberts. But he's not as far off as people think. I mean, the way that he is used in this passing game, his versatility, Parker's the real deal. That speed is something that Chase doesn't have, and he can do things that BYU's other receivers right now simply cannot do. And when you look ahead at the next few games on the schedule, Utah, everybody, every BYU fan knows what Utah is known for defensively, that physical man coverage. Like you've got to be able to create space, period. If you can't, you're just going to be completely taken out of the game. That's the way Iowa State plays too. Their secondary has been decimated, but that's the way they like to play. And then Texas Tech, of course, does the same thing. This could be the next, 3-week stretch, the biggest and most important 3-week stretch of Parker Kingston's career, because creating space against big physical secondaries or double coverage just isn't Chase Roberts' specialty, right? Like you need that shiftiness and that route running, that speed, and that's what Parker does well. This could be a really, really big few weeks for Parker. He stepped up in a big way against Arizona. He played well against West Virginia as well, like you already mentioned. He's good, and I think he's going to continue to do good things over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about his punt return, right? That set up the game tying touchdown. Like that was, again, he was very impactful in this game, and it was good to see, especially after his fumble early in the season, right? Yeah. I think a lot of fans were kind of down on him and ready to kind of write him off, especially with Tiger Bachmeier behind him. They thought there was a lot of potential with Tiger. We just haven't seen that yet. And so Parker has needed to step up, and he has. Who hasn't stepped up, in my opinion, is, we'll just kind of blanket the defense in general. I thought the defense really struggled, and it wasn't because of the weather delay. Again, they allowed a pretty impressive drive in the first quarter, I believe. It was the first quarter from Arizona where they scored their touchdown, and I think there were moments where BYU's defense looked good, but they didn't sack Noah Fifita one time, and Noah's very elusive, and BYU tends to struggle against these kind of elusive. It's crazy that we've had now like 3 elusive quarterbacks in the span of 6 games with Caden Salter, Noah Fifita, and I can't remember
Both of the
who else
West
is.
Virginia guys that they trotted out
West
there.
Virginia's, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And next week's not going to be any different, right? So you've got probably the most versatile quarterback in Devon Dampier, and we've seen what he can do, and so BYU has struggled against those guys, and it's interesting when you look at the big plays that Arizona had. It seemed to be when BYU's backups were in, like a Dunlap, for example. Dunlap just kind of giving up on the play. I think he turned around and didn't see the ball and lost it in the he didn't even know the ball was coming,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And so he kind of gave up on the play, but it was a dime from Noah Fafita. I don't know if Dunlap could have prevented it anyway, but it's those types of plays against backups that you can't allow. And Arizona definitely took advantage of the backups coming in. I think the starters are fine. I'm a little bit concerned that Raiders injury may be long term, because I think Rader is a big part of this BYU secondary, and you can't lose him. There's three guys you can't. I mean, really four guys. Every guy in the secondary you can't lose. Tanner Wall, Raider Demooney, Alexander, and Evan Johnson. You can't lose those guys, right? That's your core secondary. You cannot lose them. And Raider needs to be healthy. I think Raider needs to be healthy against Utah, or else we're in trouble. But I'm a little concerned about the depth of the secondary, and this game seemed to kind of expose that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the game that Gennaro Guilford and Jay Hill have to play in the secondary is a little bit like that running back approach that we talked about, that it's Evan Johnson, right? And Maury Bamba hasn't been what I think everybody hoped Maury Bamba would be coming into the season. But he played well against Arizona, so hopefully he can kind of step up and maintain that consistency week over week. And then it's a bunch of young guys again. And so if Evan Johnson goes down, all of a sudden it's Jaden Dunlap or, it's Tavion Beasley who's going back outside. And all of a sudden you have to rely on them all the time. And so I think that what Jay and Gennaro have to do is they've got to sprinkle in experience while they can, because you have to be prepared in the event of an injury. And it sucks when it comes in at times where the game is close. But guys, this is the Big 12 conference. Every game's going to be close from here forward. So there's not like this ideal time. You can't just wait for garbage time and throw guys in anymore. I think that's the balancing act that the coaches are having to play, and it's tough. I do worry about the depth. I'm a little less concerned about the depth at safety. I think Raider Demooney is clearly one of the best safeties, deserves to be a starter. There's a gap between Raider and the guys behind him. But I love Falatau Satuali. He's a big play. Maybe he plays more if Raider Demooney can't go. Talon Alfrey's a guy who can step up and play really, really good reps. He's not Raider Demooney, but he can play really, really good football. So I like the depth at the safety spot. If they could get Jonathan Cabea back at nickel, then Cabea and Beasley, all of a sudden that's your nickel rotation, and Tommy Prassis can go back to the safety spot. That helps as well. So I think that there's some depth there. I'm a little bit concerned, really. I don't know if it's a depth concern or if it's just an overall performance concern, but man, the defensive line has not been what I hoped it would be. I think that some of that is by design. I don't think that this defensive line is supposed to be the gap shooters that are blowing every play up, because you look at the best players on this defense, it's Jack Kelly, it's Isaiah Glasker. You can make a case that Cialia Serra's right there in that mix as well. And so I think that there's an element of like, hey, let's free things up and let those guys make plays, because they're the guys who can make the most plays. So I think that's part of it. But also, yeah, the defensive line, they're not creating a lot of havoc. And it feels pretty vanilla. It doesn't feel very creative. I've seen BYU go to stunts. I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, there's no stunts, there's no twists, there's none of that. It's there, but it just sort of happens, and it seems a little bit predictable. I don't know if it's predictable. I don't know if it's just not being executed well, but it's not very effective. And that's been a little bit surprising through 6 games of this season. And then on the edges, especially, I'm a little bit surprised that BYU hasn't been able to win more one-on-one battles. They don't get as many as you would think that they do. They've played a lot of odd fronts this year, and so a lot of those edge rushers are getting double teamed, right? They're getting that guard tackle duo against them, so it's tough. But I thought that there would be more battles won on the edge, more of these defensive ends getting in and creating some havoc. And you're right, Jake, they didn't do it against Fafita. He is elusive, but man, he's not that elusive, right? Like they should have been able to create some havoc, and I just didn't see it happen. And it's happened consistently enough now. I'm not a smart enough football brain to know why, but I'm smart enough to look at it and be like, there's a ton of talent in that room. This has to be by design. I don't understand it, but I can't believe with all of that talent that they're just not winning all of these battles. It's got to be by design.
Yeah, and that's the thing with an elusive quarterback, and you're going to see the same thing this week against Devon Dampier, which is why I'm a little concerned. Is that you can't just bull rush, right? You can't just stunt and give up containment, right? Because against a non-mobile quarterback that's just going to step up in the pocket, your whole strategy as a defensive line is to collapse the pocket from by any means necessary. And if they roll out to the right or whatever, then you can chase him down, right? If with an elusive quarterback like a Noah Fafita, like a Devon Dampier, like a Caden Salter, you're not going to run him down, right? And Bodie Schoonover luckily did. He had a shoestring tackle at one point for a minimal gain, but it's just not that you're not going to get a sack if you collapse the pocket that way. And so I think that's kind of the strategy. That's why it looks vanilla, is because they have to almost retain the pocket to keep this mobile elusive quarterback contained, so he's not getting out of the pocket. And it's interesting too to see these kind of mobile quarterbacks. They don't really step up in the pocket. And Devon Dampier is one of these guys.
Right.
He doesn't really step up in the pocket. He almost prefers a collapsed pocket that he can just roll out. He literally just spins around and rolls out of it. And even if a guy's coming in free off of a blitz, like he can get away from that and extend the play outside of the pocket. I think these quarterbacks prefer that. And so that's kind of the strategy, is you don't want them to get out of the pocket, but you also want to get pressure on the quarterback. And so it's this kind of like dichotomy of, how can you actually pressure a quarterback that prefers to be out of the pocket?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I necessarily fault the game plan against the Noah Fafita or Caden Salter. And again, you're going to see probably a lot of the same thing with Devon Dampier. What I didn't love is what happened when they did finally get to the quarterback, whether it was as he's passing or right after he's passing, which I'm talking about the JJ Tanavasa or the Kiana Tanavasa targeting penalty, which I think was a good call. And then the Glasgow targeting penalty, which I think was a terrible call, which resulted obviously in the roughing the passer after they overturned the targeting. First of all, what did you think of the Glasgow penalty? Was it deserved?
So I think by the book, they do have the whole roughing the passer. If you're in a passing motion in its head or neck area, it's a roughing the passer. And so I think by the book, it probably was the right call. I think in practicality, no. Like, I don't know how a 6'5" Isaiah Glasgow is supposed to be able to tackle a 5'8" Noah Fafita without coming in contact above the shoulder pads. And so when you looked at it, that felt like one of those that they flagged the targeting and they added on the roughing afterwards, right? Because I don't know if they felt like they had to or whatever it was. They can reverse targeting. They can't reverse the roughing. I think if they could, they would have reversed both. Like I think that's once you looked at it slowed down, I didn't think it was a great call. Maybe by the letter of how things are written, it's the right call. But look, by the letter that things are written, every pass downfield is probably a pass interference. There's a lot more holding that gets called. And you just sort of have to, as a ref, you interpret what influences the play and what doesn't. Like, look, that play was blown up. That wasn't malicious. That shouldn't have been a roughing call. So I don't agree with the flag. And I agree with you, Jake, that the Tanuvasa targeting, that was as cut and dry as it gets. And he's simply got to be better. There's no mincing words about that. Team leader, a captain, you cannot make that play. Hard stop. Yeah. He's got to be better.
And that's 2 games, right? That's 2 games this season where he's done it, where he's had a back-breaking play that really puts his defense, his team, his guys in a bad position, right? They were in, I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was 3rd down on the targeting call, but it was, it wasn't, it was a position. They were in a position where they could have taken possession of the ball at some, it was either 2nd and long or 3rd and long, and it gave him an automatic first down. The Glasgow one, so here's the letter of the law. Let me just read it real quick. So it calls out, by the way, the targeting was thrown out. So this was not targeting. I think they threw the flag, right? They call roughing the passer, right? with targeting, right? So it's 2 penalties, and the targeting results in an ejection if upheld. So it was not upheld, but I think it was that contact to the helmet. Now, here's where I disagree with here's why I disagree with the interpretation of the letter of the law. The law says it's roughing the passer if there's forcible contact to the head or neck area that does not meet the requirements of Rule 914. 914 is targeting, right? So it's either targeting or if it's not targeting, it's this kind of next level. And what I kind of called out on social media was it doesn't meet this requirement because the contact was not forcible. And I don't know how that's really even defined. I think it's defined by launching. It's defined by striking with your arm or your fist, right? That's forcible contact. To me, this was incidental contact by the face mask of Isaiah Glasker against the guy that's 5'9".
Yeah.
Right. And Glasker's a foot taller than him. Like it's very incident. Isaiah's not launching. He's not lowering his helmet. He actually kind of started to, and then brought it back up. And so to me, like the contact was very incidental, and it's the type of play that it happens so much in college football, right? How many, like you could go back and look at the last 100 sacks in college football, and you'll see probably more than 50% of the time there's incidental contact to the helmet.
Yeah.
And it's not avoid, especially when the quarterback's lower than, smaller than 5'10",
yeah,
5'11", right? And so to me, it was incidental. I don't like the call. Again, it resulted, I believe, in a field goal for Arizona. So it was, pretty substantial in the grand scheme of things. Right. But I don't love that call. And but I'm glad that Glasker was obviously able to come back in the game because of the targeting was overturned.
Yeah,
a couple more key.
Well,
go ahead.
One quick thought, just to kind of put a bow on that. I'm with you. Far be it for me to defend an official. You watch the NFL on Sundays. Watch a bunch of college football on Saturdays. They are going to err on the side of protecting the quarterback, for better or worse, right or wrong. It's what they do. So I'm with you. Like I think that the very clear, there was no intent. I think that this was very clearly incidental. I also think that they're probably going to flag that call most of the time for better or worse, just because that's the way that football has kind of emerged, and you just sort of have to adjust, and it's hard and it's annoying, but I think that's where we're at. And you hope that BYU's quarterback at 6'3", 235 pounds gets that same benefit of the doubt. I doubt it, but you hope that he does. Because that is the nature of the sport. And if you're going to protect the small quarterbacks, you've also got to protect the big quarterbacks. And as long as that remains true over a season, then I can get on board and be fine with it. But so far, I haven't seen, has Bear had a roughing call against him yet? I don't think so.
No.
Right? So,
but again, I mean, you look at that specific scenario, if Glasker's doing the same thing on Bear, his face mask is hitting Bear's shoulder pads. Yeah. Right. So it's incidental, and it just so happens to be because Noah Fifita was so short. And I will say this too, holistically, that game I think was officiated really well.
Yeah,
I had no real qualms other than that play in terms of officiating. And I actually think it's funny that Arizona fans were talking about how the refs gave BYU that game. And I'm like, I looked at every single penalty that was called against Arizona, especially in the fourth quarter. There's the holding play on Noah Fifita's touchdown run. I think it was Noah that ran it. No, it wasn't Noah. Was it Noah? I don't think it was Noah.
It was either way. The other running back. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he got thrown down, right? It was pretty clear.
Totally. In fact, I thought there were two. I thought there were two holds on that play.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, when they showed the replay, I was like, yeah, it was totally holding. And then they showed the replay again. I was like, oh, they're actually talking about this guy. Yeah, that's even worse. So yeah, there was definitely two holds on that play. They called one. Great. No qualms against that. Then there was a pass interference against Chase Roberts, but on the defender that was guarding Chase Roberts in the end zone, put the ball on the 2-yard line. Obvious, right? He's grabbing his shoulder. You can see the jersey pulling off of his shoulder pad. And then there was the pass interference against Parker, or the defender that was defending Parker, where he's kind of bear hugging him from behind. And I get that that's more ticky-tack. That's probably the most ticky-tack pass interference call of that game. But at the same time, they were already on the 3-yard line. The penalty brought them to the 2-yard line. It made it, instead of fourth down, it was first down. But they scored on the very next play anyway.
Yeah.
So you run the same play on 4th and 3 instead of 1st and 2, and you're getting the same outcome. So I don't think that really affected the outcome of that game. So yeah, I think overall penalties, the officiating was fine in that game. Cougar alumni know what it means to rise and shout, and that's exactly what TrueWear Services helps your business do. They specialize in merch production, swag, uniforms, custom printing and design, plus web stores and fulfillment. So repping your company, team, or school is seamless. You've built the brand. Now it's time to showcase it. Partner with TrueWear Services today and give your organization the same pride and polish you showed in Cougar Blue. Go to truewearservices.com/CougarBoard to get started. This episode is brought to you by Aptiv Pest Control. Aptiv believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit AptivPestControl.com/loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787. Mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's AptivPestControl.com/loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787. Terms and conditions apply. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. Real quick, and we got a lot to talk about the Utah game, but I really wanted to talk about just kind of the I think BYU just needs to quit shooting themselves in the foot. And this goes into Utah too, because if they shoot themselves in the foot the way they did against Arizona, they're not going to beat Utah. They'll probably get blown out by Utah. And what I mean by shooting yourself in the foot, you're up 14-7, right? Bear throws his interception. I think it was a bad throw, but it was also a great play by the corner to turn around right at the last second and pick it off. But then you also had the fake punt. And I'm just not a fan of it. Not at that time of the game, not at that time, not position in the field. And it was 4th and 6, 4th and 7. They're like, Vanderhaar's not getting there. And I don't love the play call. And then you had the missed field goal. And then you had Bears' second interception, which I think was probably his worst decision of the season. Those are four like crazy impactful plays that could have changed this from an overtime win to potentially a 2-touchdown win. And I get that penalties and mistakes happen every game. But good teams, right? The Alabamas of the world, the Texas Tech this year of the world, the Oregons of the world, the Ohio States of the world, they don't make those mistakes. And if they do, they overcome them right away. And BYU needs to either stop making those mistakes or be better at overcoming them. Otherwise, they're not going to win any of the next. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, right? Because I just think the next 4 games on the schedule are daunting. And if you make those mistakes against any of the next 4 teams, you're not going to win those games.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. You can't make the mistakes. The difference that I see, BYU is not Ohio State or Oregon or Alabama or any of those teams, right? Like, and so I think that that aggressive kind of gunslinger nature is so embedded in the DNA of what Kalani Sitake wants this roster, wants this team to be. It's sort of like Brett Favre as your quarterback, right? Like, he's going to make some great plays. He's going to win a lot of games. He's also going to throw a ton of interceptions, right? Like, I think this is who this team is as it is currently constructed. I mean, you go back even to like Ty Detmer, right? Like, he won a Heisman. He also threw like 25 picks. You sort of have to live with the bad in order to get the good. And I just don't think that BYU right now, with a true freshman quarterback, with the injury situation, with the lack of depth at running back, with the question marks on defense in that secondary that we've already kind of gone through, I don't know how they get away from having that aggressive nature embedded inside of who they are. I don't think they can just beat teams straight up, especially the teams coming up. I think they have to get creative, and it's tricky because you have to be smart. Like, the fake punt is a great example to me. Generally, when there's a fake punt call, the punter's given both the option to run the fake that is called or to punt, right? And it's like, hey, go read. Here's your one read that you got to look for. If that read is there, cool, run the fake. If it's not there, kick it. And I don't know what Sam Vanderhaar did or didn't see. I don't know. I assume he had 2 play calls. Like, that's how every fake punt in the world is generally called. It's not like, hey, come hell or high water, we're running a fake punt. Like, that's just not how it works. So I don't know what Vanderhaar did or didn't see, but that's generally how things go. I'm with you on the mistakes. They've got to play mistake-free football. When you play really good football teams, that's what you have to do. But I don't think they can. I don't think that playing mistake-free football could come at the expense of trying to make big plays. And that's a funny balance as this coaching staff. When you've got a guy like Bear Bachmeier, who's played now 6 full games, right? Like, that's it. That's all he's got. That last interception, I think it was the last one. Which did he throw? The last one was the weird fumble one, right? That was the second pick. I hated it, right? Like, I hated that play. I just throw it away. Like, everybody in the stadium is saying the same thing at the end of it. But also at the end of that, if you watch the way that play worked and you back it up and you see where the defender was, I don't know that it was necessarily a bad decision as much as an awful, horrible throw. If he throws space and lets Carson go get it, maybe that's the biggest play of the game. It was just a terrible throw and the defender went and made a play. I don't think that you can take that away of like, hey, Bear, go try to make that play. I don't think you can say like, hey, no, just chuck it away, because that's not what this offense is. So it's a balance. I'm with you, Jake. I hear what you're saying, and I mostly agree with you. I with that one small caveat of, as long as it doesn't come at the expense of changing your identity, then yeah, you got to play mistake-free football. But BYU simply does not have enough depth of talent to just line up straight up and beat teams over these next 4 weeks. They're not going to beat Texas Tech just going mano-a-mano. Like, they're going to have to get creative. They're going to have to take some chances. And there's probably going to be some mistakes that come with that, and you just hope that you minimize those as much as you can.
Yeah, that's fair. You take the good with the bad. Okay, let's move on to Utah, because obviously I think this is to me, this is the biggest game of the year. It's BYU's Super Bowl, and as much as BYU fans will deny that, this is BYU's Super Bowl, right? Now, granted, if they go to college, if they go to the playoffs, different, right? That's obviously the ultimate goal. But in the regular season, in terms of what's on the schedule, I don't think Texas Tech is the biggest game. I don't think Iowa State is the biggest game. This is the biggest game of the year, and I love that high noon is coming for this game, because they came last year and BYU blew out Arizona in that game. So they tend to have a little bit of good luck when they come to town, when they come to Provo. Obviously, much different team in Utah coming in. By the way, if anyone has any sign ideas for Big Noon Kickoff, please put them in the comments. Maybe we can make a few signs and bring them. Are you going to High Noon Kickoff? Are you going to the game?
I will not be. There is, small tease, KSLSports.com, high school sports. We're doing the bracket reveal show that day, so I will not be at Big Game Kickoff. No.
Very nice. Well, that's a good reason. It's a good reason. We love high school sports in here at the Loyal Cougars podcast. I cover high school football every Friday, so
blast.
Very much a high school football fan in Utah. Let's look at Utah though by the numbers, Jeff, because this is where it feels daunting. And if I look at these numbers, I think, and BYU fans are going to murder me for saying this, I think Utah might be the second best team in the conference by the numbers. And here's what I mean by that. Utah is number 2 in scoring offense in the Big 12. They're number 2 in scoring defense. BYU is number 3 in both categories. BYU has the number 1 rush offense, and Dampier is a big part of that, right? And they have the number 8 rush defense. So they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of run defense. They're number 12 in pass offense. So they don't pass terribly well, even though Dampier is a very efficient and high percentage quarterback. They don't pass the ball a lot. Mm-hmm. And they don't pass the ball particularly well. And I think a big part of that is because they don't really have great targets to throw to. They don't have a Chase Roberts. They don't have a Parker Kingston. They have a tight end, right? They have a great tight end. They have decent running backs out of the backfield. They don't have one guy. They spread it out a lot. They are the number 2 pass defense in the conference. They're also number 2 in red zone percentage. By the way, BYU is number 1 in red zone defensive percentage. So that'll be an interesting kind of matchup. If and when Utah ever gets in the red zone. They are also number 1 in third down conversions. And I think Jason Beck is a big part of this. By the way, BYU is number 2 in defensive third down conversion percentage. So again, red zone percentage and third down conversions, I think are going to make and break this game. And when I say Jason Beck is a big part of this, his play calling allows, and we talk about Dampier a lot. Dampier works well within this system, but Jason Beck is very content with 4, 5, 6 yards on first down.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's an easy third down conversion, right? So that's kind of the strategy, and it's probably the strategy of a lot of offenses, and they can't necessarily execute it well. But Beck will get 5, 6 yards on first down and make it a 3rd and 2. And that's why they're the number 1 third down conversion team in the conference. Devon Dampier, obviously a big part of that. He leads the Big 12 in completion percentage. I think it's like 74%. He is their offense, Jeff. And if BYU can contain him, which is a massive if, 5 teams this year have not been able to, I think BYU wins the game, but it's going to come down to, can BYU contain Devon Dampier?
Yeah, to me, the scariest people on that Utah sideline, really every year, but especially this year, it's Jim Harding and it's Lou Powell, right? Like I actually look at Utah's roster, and, I'm not intimidated by the receivers, not intimidated by the running back. Honestly, I'm not like overly intimidated by Devon Dampier. That offensive line is unreal. And because they are as good as they are, Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomo at the tackles, you got Togiai, like the interior is way better than it gets credit for as well. Because they are so good, everybody else has time. Everybody else can take their time. They can make mistakes, and you're just not getting home, right? And Devon Dampier has, I think he made a comment in the offseason that's just fan fodder of like, oh, I got like 8 seconds to throw. He legitimately has 6 or 7 seconds to throw on most plays. Like, they have been that good. And then on the flip side of the ball, like that defensive line, Lou Powell does a fantastic job. And it's not just Lou Powell, but that defensive line is great. Like, it is great. It is going to speed things up for Bear Bachmeier because that pressure is going to get home. Those edge rushers, no matter who it is, this year it's John Henry Daly, but like honestly, plug in any name. It is the design, it is the coaching, it is the way that Utah is built. Any name coming off of that edge, they're going to get home. That's what they do. And they've been doing it long enough that you have to just start to credit those coaches, right? Like, and so that is what concerns me so much about this game is while BYU has played well, especially the offensive line, I think has played really well. They've played well in certain facets, right? The inside run game has gone really, really well. The pass game the pass protection has been good, but like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of max protect. There's a lot of things helping out the pass protection. But it's been good. It's been very effective. This is a different test, right? Like, this is a very, very different test. And that Utah offensive line, I think that is like the biggest wild card for Jason Beck. Go back in time to when Jason Beck was, wearing the right color and he's on our sidelines. Taysom Hill would have been his quarterback. Just imagine the kinds of numbers that Taysom Hill puts up if he's running behind this Utah offensive line. I mean, he's going to run for 400 yards a game. That is such a cheat code for any offensive coordinator to have somebody this good. And Devon Dampier is good enough that when he has that time and when he has those creases, when he has those seams, all he's got to do is make the right read, and he's got plenty of time to figure it out. It makes me nervous, right? Because I think this is the toughest, including Texas Tech, especially on the offensive line. I think this is the toughest offensive line that BYU is going to face. I think Utah's hype is legitimate on that offensive line. They are one of the best, if not the best, in the entire country. It's going to be a tall task, and that makes everything really, really easy for Devon Dampier, and he's good enough to make sure that he can take advantage of that.
I wish it was a tall tale that they were good.
Yeah, me too, man.
They are legitimate, and it's very cliche. It's very coach speak to say like this game's going to be won in the trenches. That is the case in this game, and John Henry Daly is one of the best pass rushers. In fact, one of the best edge rushers in the country. Obviously leads the Big 12 in tackles for loss and is number 2 in sacks. He is going to be in the backfield a lot, and it's a matter of, can BYU contain that? Can BYU? They're going to have to double him. They're going to have to put LJ as a chip blocker in some cases, and can Bear step up in the pocket and avoid that pressure? I think Bear is going to be sacked a few times, and how does he respond to that? And then again, can BYU get pressure on the other end? Can BYU get pressure on Devon Dampier? Because I think Devon, when he has a clean pocket, he's a great passer.
Yeah, he's very
when
good.
He doesn't have a clean pocket, and when I say that, I mean like when he's running backwards, right? Not when he's rolling to his right or rolling to his left. When he's rolling out, he's fine. When he has a guy in his face, when he's running backwards, when he gets in this scramble mode, and you see the best of Devon Dampier and you see the worst of Devon Dampier when he's in that position.
Yeah.
And can BYU get the worst of him in those situations? There was a pass that he had against Arizona State that was terrible, like a terrible throw down the middle of the field. It should have been intercepted. It wasn't. It was dropped by the safety. But you're going to get that with Devon Dampier. And, can BYU take advantage of when Devon's actually under pressure? That's going to be a big part. Can they get him under pressure first, and then can they take advantage of the mistakes that he makes when he is under pressure? That's what this game's going to come down to. And what I worry the most about this game is that this is likely Kyle's last game against BYU. And that's huge. I think players will play for their coach. I mean, I think they're going to step it up for their coach. And the other thing is, and I don't think, I don't think a lot of the players necessarily current players necessarily care about this unless they've been around since 2022. They've lost 2 in a row, right? 2 in a row that they probably should have won. 2022, they were a good team. And I think coming into that game in 2022, they thought they were going to win that game pretty easily. and BYU pulled out the upset. Last year, I think BYU was probably the better team going into the game. In fact, they were for sure the better team going into the game, but Utah had their number throughout the entire game until the last drive. And they thought they should have won that game too. And so they're going to come back this season. Obviously, a lot of those guys on that team are gone, but they're going to come back this season with a massive chip on their shoulder, understanding that they don't want it to be 3 in a row.
Yeah.
And, you can say anything you want about kind of the physicality of Utah and the skill set of Devon Dampier and the intimidation of John Henry Daly. This is going to be a mental game more than anything. And I think the team that can mentally come out not flat, right? We've seen BYU come out flat against Utah in the past. Whichever team decides to show up early and show up often is going to win this game. And I know that this feels very like cliche and fluffy to say, but that is the reality of this rivalry. Is the team that comes out ready to play from the kickoff typically wins the game. Knockout punches early on. We've seen some pick sixes from Utah in recent games where they've won, right? That sets the tone for the game. And it's not any more impactful than it is for a rivalry game like this one.
One of the interesting components to that I'm curious to see how it plays out, because we haven't seen this perspective from Utah in decades. But there were a lot of times where BYU over the course of that 9-game stretch or whatever it was, however long it was, like the decade-long stretch of losses to Utah, BYU came out hyped, almost too hyped. They were too set on, hey, we got to beat Utah or else, right? Like, and then they came out, and even if we saw the instances where they were completely flat, and then we saw instances where they were so hyped up that they couldn't, as much as snap the ball without jumping on, having a false start or whatever it was, where they've been too amped up to play this game. I think Utah, because of all the reasons you mentioned, it's one of the things that makes me nervous for this game. The win one for the Gipper mindset, for all of those things. Absolutely. We saw that kind of desperation from BYU, and we saw it kind of backfire. I don't know how Utah handles that. They haven't had to do it against BYU in a long time. So that's a component that I'm anxious to see for sure. There's a lot of emotions when you look at the guys who are there, because most of this roster is new for Utah. But there's certain leaders on that team, and there's big names. Spencer Fano, clearly. Logan Fano, clearly. They know this BYU program well. Caleb Lomo knows this BYU program well. John Henry Daly, you don't think he has any ill feelings towards BYU right now? Yeah, he knows this program really, really well. How do they balance that and not come out flat, but also not come out so aggressive that they shoot themselves in the foot? BYU's been there in those shoes too, for sure. So I'm curious about that. My thoughts on this game, I'm really kind of curious. Okay, so Jason Beck, it's only his second year as a full-time coordinator without himself, right? Or without a co-offensive coordinator. Maybe he had that 1 year at Syracuse, but I feel like he was a co-offensive coordinator at Syracuse. Maybe I'm wrong. He hasn't had very many games where he's going against a defensive coaching staff that knows him intimately well. Kelly Papinga knows Jason Beck as well as anybody in the country. How does that change things, right? Kelly Papinga knows this offense. He knows Jason Beck's tendencies. He has seen, maybe not Devon Dampier, but he was here when Jason Beck was coaching Taysom Hill, right? He was coaching Brennan Armstrong and all of those guys that they had at Virginia that were similar in nature to the way that Devon Dampier plays. Different players, different sizes, different shapes or whatever, but similar in the way that they see the game. What kind of advantage is that? Is that a big advantage? Is it a non-factor at all? What kind of role does that play? That's something that I don't think Jason Beck has had to deal with a ton, where one of his guys that saw him every single week in practice for years is now on the other sideline trying to stop him. I'm curious to see if that's an advantage for BYU. I think it could be. Certainly an advantage isn't the end-all be-all, but I think that's something that BYU can look at and say, hey, we know how to contain this offense, because here is the last 15 years of Kelly Papinga's practice logs that say we know what this offense does. I'm anxious to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And we'll definitely have lots more to talk about next week. And if you want more of what Jeff has to say and want to see more of what Jeff has to say, follow him on social media. He's great on Twitter. Obviously the Give Him Hell Brigham. our website and podcast. You can follow them over there. You're still doing 24/7 sports too, right? With your crystal ball predictions. I saw you do some predictions in the off season.
I know I didn't do it for a long time, but then I realized, for a long time, I was like, I don't want to spoil the moment for these kids, but now these kids are making more money than I'm going to see in my lifetime. I guess I don't have to worry so much about that moment.
Yeah. So, follow Jeff on social media, hit him up on Give Him Hell Brigham website and podcast, and on 24/7 Sports. By the way, BYU, I just got shown this. BYU number 8 in the preseason AP basketball poll, their highest preseason ranking ever.
It's awesome.
Not to set the expectation too high for BYU basketball, but we've still got some football to talk about. So we'll talk more about that next week. Hopefully after a win, BYU, I really hope, can win at least 1 or 2 of the next 3 games. If they do, I think they're in a very good position to make it to the Big 12 championship game. And then we're talking about some serious, repercussions at the end of the season, the postseason. But we will talk about that next week. Until then, I'm Jake Edmonds. That's Jeff Hansen. We'll see you next week.